Yes, good afternoon to you, Mark. And we're outside Tapas Revolution in Westfields in Stratford today. We are talking about that falling pound and how it's going to be affecting the restaurant business and the restaurant trade. Now, Tapas Revolution is a Spanish-themed restaurant. There's a group of them. There's 10 restaurants in the UK. And as the name suggests, it's an authentically Spanish restaurant. So they import much of their food. But that is the issue, as most food at wholesale is sold in dollars. So they are currently going to be spending a lot more on getting the food into their restaurants. Well, earlier I spoke to the executive chef and the founder of Tapas Revolution. His name is Omar Allibhoy, about what the falling pound means for his business.
Well, it's incredibly concerning because it's a matter of time that we start feeling it. We've saw it on the news. Now, very, very soon, it will start happening in the restaurants, in the supermarkets. We import most of our produce in this country. We are a heavily populated, small country, and farming is at a premium. Wages are expensive, therefore that's why they farm in other countries. It makes complete sense. And here I have a few examples of produce that it's imported that we serve in our restaurants. Table olives and olive oil. Spain is the largest producer of olive oil in the world, and that is about to go up by 20% in a month's time. So for all of those of you at home, make sure you stock up some good extra virgin olive oil in the month ahead. Spanish Serrano ham. And I thought I'll bring something as simple as a breadstick, which is a great example of a produce that may seem like the cheapest thing in the supermarket, and the reality is that it has two of the produce that has increased most in price in recent months after the Ukrainian war, which is wheat and oil, as well as water. Water is free, luckily, still. Some good news in there. But that's the reality of what we are facing at the minute. As much as we like to use local produce seasonally, the reality is to have a differentiated offer. You must have ingredients that come from all around the world.
Who is the executive chef of Tapas Revolution and also the founder. Well, earlier I was speaking to Ronan Gibbon, who is the chief executive of Recce. Now, that is an ordering app that restaurants use to get in touch with their suppliers. And he was predicting yesterday that that restaurants might have to offer much more limited menus in the upcoming months because ingredients will become so expensive. And he also predicted that many restaurants such as these that rely heavily on imported produce, such as Tapas Revolution, which we heard earlier, they import about 60% of the produce on their menus. He was saying that many restaurants will have to look at sourcing their produce more locally, looking at British produce, which is going to be expensive, but also a different way of working for these restaurants. And of course, it's not just the falling pound that is now going to affect the hospitality sector. There is, of course, a cost of living crisis and the energy bills that these restaurants are now facing. Even though there is a cap, it's still double on what it was last year. And when I was speaking to Omar this morning, he was saying it's not just the food that's gone up, it's everything from the cost of napkins and the cost of printing menus. So it really is a very challenging time for the hospitality sector. And the challenge will now be to look at the cost base, to look at the suppliers and see if they can get creative and try and mediate and mitigate some of that financial impact on its customers.
Yeah, and of course the other problem is if they want to go and get a loan to try and buy themselves some time, that's going to be more expensive now because of what's happened with interest rates climbing further and faster.
Well, it's exactly that as well, Mark. I mean, you've got to remember as well, many restaurants are already on their knees and emerged on their knees from the coronavirus pandemic. Many of them only got through that with the help of loans and with help from Rishi Sunak and the various things that were put in place to support them through that time. And it looked as though they were coming out of that. Now they've been hit by a cost of living crisis and a falling pound, which is making their supply chains and their produce so much more expensive. And where you could previously obviously rely on the banks or the loans to get you through a difficult few months. With these interest rates, it now looks like even getting one of those loans or even the repayments on them would be far too difficult for many businesses to reach. So it is going to be a very challenging few months for the hospitality sector. And don't forget as well, Mark, that the cost of living crisis means that going out to eat is a very expensive hobby, fun thing to do for people and for families. And it's going to be very, very tough for people to come to a restaurant and spend money for 4 or 5 people. So even getting people through the door is going to be a huge challenge for the hospitality sector through the cost of living crisis.